This week on Silicon Reel, we have Alicia Navarro, CEO and co-founder of Skimlinks.
It took me a year of pitching to raise my first seed round. Despite how difficult it is to raise money, it's easier than actually growing a company. You have to be driven by wanting to build a great company. Valuations don't matter, terms matter, and being here tomorrow matters. Hiring and training people is a hard thing, so you want to create an environment where people want to stay. To be part of the world that is creating our future, I think is one of the most creative things and important things to be doing right now.
Silicon Reel presents Alicia Navarro, Skimlinks.
Take ego out of the equation and just focus on doing a good job.
In London, technology is the Silicon Roundabout. Introducing a new talk show dedicated to the people of the London technology startup scene. Silicon Reel. Each week, interviewing entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, financial technology, accelerators, and incubators in an exciting three-person format. Learn about the people behind the innovation. Locally filmed, locally sourced. Silicon Reel. It's about the people. This is Silicon Reel, the weekly talk show dedicated to the people of the London technology startup scene. My guest today is Alicia Navarro, who is the CEO and co-founder of Skimlinks, which helps publishers earn revenues and gain insights from their commerce-related content. You guys automate the affiliate marketing process, turning product links into revenue generating affiliate links. You work with 1.5 million sites around the world, drive annual e-commerce sales of $625 million through your platform, 80 plus people, San Francisco, New York, London. You work with publishers such as The Independent, Hearst, Gawker Media. You are the child of Spanish migrants to Sydney, Australia, where you got your computer science degree. We're all immigrants here in London. Even the English are immigrants. You know, when they finally figure it out, I think. I'm an immigrant. Alicia, welcome to Silicon Reel.
Thank you, Brian. Delighted to be here.
I'm really glad you're here. I think this is going to be fun. We were having a little conversation in the kitchen earlier. Sometimes the best parts of the show are left in the kitchen. So it's horrible because I meet people and I'm like, don't tell me that. You know?
I try to burn it into my mind so I can bring it up later so I appear interesting.
It's like anti-rapport building what I do. So, but it's something we have to do. So we're saving it all for everyone watching. One word comes to my mind when I think of you, and it's a word we hear a lot around in this industry. I guess it's called pivot. And if you don't live in the tech world, the first time I heard that word, I think I was being taught basketball when I was a kid. And so if you don't use that word in this industry, people don't know what you're talking about. Some call it a euphemism. Some call it a business reality. Some just call it tech jargon. I've done it myself many times in my small media iteration. Sometimes I do it in my mind, like on my way to work. I've pivoted 3 times and I'm kind of back to normal. But I was wondering if you could tell me what that word means to you. Is it something that's used too often? Is it used accurately? I know in 2006 you started with Skimbit, and that's the reason I bring this up. Tell us about the art of the pivot or what it means.
A nice esoteric question. I mean, I don't think of it as something deliberate as a pivot. I mean, when you're actually going through that nightmare of your business and your dreams failing, it's more like a survival mechanism. It's whatever you need to do to get through another day. So we started with a totally different company. It was a B2C social decision-making tool, like a very ugly early Pinterest, and that just didn't work. And I was either going to lose all my money and fail, or I had to find a solution. So in retrospect, it's called a pivot, but at the time, it's mere survival.
Right. Okay. And so is that term overused these days, or is it just a term that any small business has been using since the beginning of time?
I think it's probably very prevalent at the moment because of the popularity of kind of agile methods of product development, where you're not setting off on day one with a long-term vision. You're starting off with a small idea that you validate, you build, you validate, you build, you validate, you build, and so there's a lot of pivoting that goes on throughout that process as you learn about the market, learn about your customers, learn about what your capabilities are. So there's a lot of kind of mini pivots that companies go through. And there's probably also a lot of people that are lured to the idea of entrepreneurialism that basically say, I want to be an entrepreneur, now I need to come up with an idea. and so the idea may not work out, and so they need to pivot. Whereas I guess before this kind of cult of entrepreneurship started, you started with an idea, and then you became an entrepreneur as opposed to the other way around.
Right. So it's the rock star effect. Are we putting the cart ahead of the horse in a certain sense with that?
I think that is a trend, certainly.
Right. There's something called cognitive biases, and it's one of my guests from London Real talks that says that we have 25 cognitive biases as humans. One is called the reciprocity bias, like when the waitress brings you a mint before you get the tip, and then you tip her more, and you're like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But it works. And one of them is media bias, like what we see in the news, and we see the Zuckerbergs, and we see the Ubers, and we see that, and we're like, oh, that's what this is. And then I've spoken with 80 people here, and I visited their offices, and it's quite a different thing, when it comes down to tech reality. Can you just tell me, has it always, you've been in this business for a long time now, has it always been that way, or is the media now much more pronounced than it used to be?
Oh, absolutely. I think, so when I started, it was about 7 years ago, and there was certainly an attractiveness to the concept of entrepreneurship, but I think that it was very hard, and so there were fewer people, I guess, that kind of got into it, and so it wasn't as glamorous. I think it's been a kind of double-edged sword over the last probably 3 or 4 years, where the good side of it is there's a recognition that to make this country and all developed countries really great, that a degree of enterprise needs to be fostered amongst its community, particularly its young. There's also been, coupled with that, a lot of the success stories of the Facebooks and so on, and these sudden billionaires. So it's created this mini gold rush of sorts, of people that think, right, I want to be rich. In the old days, it was to be a lawyer or a rock star. Now it's to be an entrepreneur. And so I think that there's a whole vicious or virtuous circle, whichever way you look at it, that's going on, of people that kind of see successes, want to emulate it. There's a whole industry that springs up around it. The government recognizes that there is a lot of good that can come from it, in terms of job growth and technology innovation. And it's just created this mass swell of interest in the space, I think.
And is it more so here than in the UK than in the US?
No, both. You only have to try to rent an apartment in San Francisco to realize there's a lot of very wealthy people out there and a lot of people trying to be wealthy.
Is that, I haven't been there recently. Is it really kind of crazy and hard to, is it a sustainable, that kind of wealth gap, or?
That's a very broad global question, isn't it? I don't think it is. But then every time someone says that, I'm sure that people said that about London, 100 years ago, and yet it continues. I think it creates a lot of problems, but it also creates a lot of great innovations. It's a double-edged sword.
Now, when you started Skimbit, you weren't even in the UK yet, right? And so you went from Australia to the UK. You've made some acquisitions in the States. You spent 2 years in San Francisco. After going on that journey, what is your view of the different kind of ecosystems? It's hard in Australia to raise capital, right?
I think now it's a lot easier, but when I started, this was 2006, I basically had spent 9 months building my first version of my website using a team of developers in Romania, working nights and weekends while I had a full-time job. And so I finally had this great website, and I went to the one VC that focused on kind of tech startups in Australia at the time. I pitched, he didn't like it, and then that was it. And so
over.
Right.
Okay.
So I decided to do what all Australians do, I guess, at that point in time, and did a kind of walkabout and went and just left my job for 6 weeks and just went traveling to try to find the answer. And during that travel, I went via London. That's where I had the concept to change Skimbit into a kind of white label version of that technology. And being there and seeing the opportunity in the scene in London was the driver for me to go back to Australia, pack up my life, sell my car, sell my furniture, give up my apartment, and move back to London to be a full-time penniless entrepreneur at the age of 30.
Okay, and that was 08-ish?
That was at the end of 2007.
Okay.
Is that right? Yes. And it was a great time. I those early days, the beginning of 2008 was a really exciting time, I think, to be an entrepreneur in London, because there weren't there wasn't the support structure as it was now. So we really depended on each other a lot more than I think perhaps happens now. And so the friendships that I formed at the time with a lot of those entrepreneurs, like the people from Huddle and Wayne and Trusted Places and so on, are now kind of my best friends in the world. And it was a very vibrant, exciting time, despite it being a smaller scene than it is now.
Right. Wasn't Skimlinks the original tech company in the Roundabout? I mean, you were one of the...
Yes, we moved to Roundabout. Before it was cool, there was basically Moo, Doppler, and Skimlinks, and that was it in the early days.
Okay. I mean, that's like in the tumbleweed days. I think of tumbleweeds going around the Roundabout. I mean, we've had Alex Hoy in here, Abindi Karia, people that were there back in the day, and I think it's hard for people to understand the difference because that's 6 years ago, and just recently, Old Street Station got a makeover.
Yeah.
But even 3-4 years ago, it was just pretty dodgy over there. Not to mention 2 years previous, right?
I didn't move to Old Street by choice. I was at the time renting a desk from this kind of person that was incubating me of sorts. And that was, we were originally on Longacre in Covent Garden, which was lovely. I loved it. But they decided,
nice.
oh no, we have to move. They bought a building on Paul Street here, just around the corner from you. And I was like, I had to move. I had nowhere else. I had a free desk and I was going to take it. So suddenly I'm like, what am I going to do all the way out east? This is ridiculous. But in the end, it kind of turned out to be a lucky accident.
Right. So you kicked it off. You're the reason we're here.
Yes, you must all bow down before me.
I want to ask you about raising money. I had asked you a couple questions before the interview, and you wrote me, I've raised 5 priced rounds of funding, 2 convertible notes, and 3 rounds of debt financing so I can raise money. That's probably more raising than I've had with 80 different companies here. I don't think anyone has that kind of series. What did you learn about raising money? And what can you tell us about it?
Try to do it as less often as you need to. It is distracting, it is demoralizing, it is atrociously hard. No matter, even really, unless you're like the 1% of companies that are an absolute slam dunk and you've got like 20 offers at your table, which doesn't really happen, it's very hard. It takes time and it's distracting. And there's 1,000 things I'd rather do. But so if I could do it all again, I'd probably raise fewer rounds of a larger amount. Yes, it involves slightly more dilution, but as long as you maintain a slow burn despite raising a lot of cash, it just gives you a lot more runway and a lot more clarity of focus, which is the biggest detractor. I mean, I see a lot of other startups that are raising very small amounts, like 50K here, 100K there, and it just means that they're constantly fundraising, which means they're not growing the business. And 2, it's never enough money to do anything important. You're never going to hire a great employee with that kind of money. You're never going to really invest in a difficult problem. And so for companies, I'm encouraging of raising as much as you can at any point in time, because fundraising is not a fun process.
Okay, there was an article that came out in TechCrunch a week or so ago, and it was someone I think in the States, and it was about the act of announcing your fundraise, and they announced a fundraise like 6 or 9 months after they actually did it, because they didn't want that to be a media event in itself. They wanted their product to be the media event, or their success with a client to be the media event. And he just said, can we just stop with the press releases for funding rounds and get on and be grown-up companies, and let's talk about the real news. And I thought it was a great article to read. It was sandwiched between some funding round articles on TechCrunch. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. All this press release stuff is just a means to an end. A funding press release is about, it's good for raising profile and so on, but it's a shambles. All it tends to mean really is that a lot of recruiters call you up the next day thinking that you have a lot of money. And we did close our round months ago. It's not something that we've done this year. It just wasn't an important thing to make the announcement.
Okay. I had Nick Brisbane in here of Forward Partners, and we had just heard about the announcement in TransferWise, and it was a big thing, I guess, because Ben Horowitz, his first European board seat, and these are big strategic things, and I'm so happy for them. But I also was asking him, I said, this concept of valuation, is it the fact that it's $1 billion or Uber is $40 billion, or should we think of it that there's just some more money being raised to see if they can get to their next point, again, this media bias, do we just get caught up in these bright lights and big numbers sometimes and not focus on the fact that these companies are like, it's like a video game, Donkey Kong or something. You got to get from here to here or you die, and then here to here you die. Is there a better way we should think about that? Should we just make a moratorium on even talking about valuations?
Valuation is interesting because fundraising is interesting because it's a validation of a milestone. It's that enough people believe in your journey and in your story that they're willing to invest and join you in that journey. That's exciting, and that is worth celebrating, and it's hard. But raising money is not the hardest thing that you do in a business. And I think the companies that focus too much on that lose sight that actually, despite how difficult it is to raise money, it's easier than actually growing a company. There are at least rules and processes that you go through to raise around. Whereas once you've got that money in the bank, then you've got infinite possibilities and an immense amount of pressure on your shoulders to actually do something. So I think the celebrations of the successes that people have once they've raised money are probably more worthy of celebration than the round itself. Okay.
And what advice do you give to young entrepreneurs when they're going to raise their funding? Let's say they're going for a Series A or an angel round, and in their mind they want the 10 million valuation. I don't know why. And I was having a chat with a buddy of mine who just finished with Imperial College here, a master's degree, and he's gone to New York and he's interviewing with a startup, and he was like, I'm going to get a point, but I might get a half a point. And I was looking at him, I'm like, you don't even care what it is. It's just in your mind, so you want to tell your friends that I got a point or 2 points, but you don't even know what that means. Am I making a point here?
You're absolutely right. It's something that we then have to train our employees about as well. Like the percentage that you get as an employee is utterly irrelevant because the valuations change, the terms change. What matters is what your shares are worth now and what they would be worth at a particular exit in the future, and that's worth talking about as an employee. But I have a very kind of firm view about valuations because I see a lot of young startups trip up on it and become obsessed with the valuation. And there's a number of really bad things that happen if you do that. The first is that if you get too high a valuation, you will struggle then to get a follow-on round, particularly one at an uplift in valuation.
Right. That's a huge point to make, especially right now in the market.
It's enormous, and it happens all the time.
If you do get what you want and raise money at this big valuation, you're setting yourself up for failure later. And you might get the great press release, and all your friends from college will say you finally made it, but in reality, you've made it harder for you.
Very much so, unless you kind of absolutely slam dunk it out of the park. That's a bit of cross metaphors there. Unless you do extremely well, you will struggle then to get a follow-on round because further rounds of funding are much harder. And one of the great things, we've always had up rounds, so we've done 5 price rounds. Everyone has been an uplift. And so the story is great. We've had follow-on investment from all our investors. Our investors are happy because there's a great story that they can tell back to their partners, which is this company is continuing to grow in valuation. Our stock is continuing to increase in value. These are the things that actually matter if you want to be a long-term company. And I know entrepreneurs sometimes obsess about, that dilutes me too much, And the thing is, if you're worried now about what you're going to walk away with in 5, 6, 7, 8 years' time, I just think it's just the wrong thing to focus on. What matters most is, are the terms good? Are the investors you're getting into bed with the kind of people that you want to be with for the next 5 to 10 years? And are you leaving yourself open for the next liquidity event, whether it be a fundraise or an exit? Because if you price yourself too high, the likelihood is you're not going to survive beyond the next round.
Okay, those are 3 things. Terms good. What's a good example of good terms or bad terms?
Making sure that you retain a degree of power, making sure that, especially in the early days, there's not nasty liquidation preference terms, making sure that it's mainly around control and around how the shares are distributed afterwards. Also things around warranties. There's just a sea of terms that make a more important difference. And we've chosen lower valuations that have been offered to us because they came from A, investors that we liked, and B, terms that were more favorable to us long term.
Okay, investors, the right investors, how do you choose them? I've heard this a few times from people that have been on here that people just jump at the first check that they get and they never even met these people, let alone about to get married to them. How do you know if it's a good investor?
How do you know if it's a good partner? If you think about it, you'll end up attached to your VC for
longer than
your relationships.
Right.
It's true. I mean, my seed round happened, 6 years ago now, and that investor is still involved in my business. Luckily, he's great and we get along very well. But I've also had investors that have not had their interests aligned with me, and it causes incredible problems down the line. And I've seen it happen again and again and again to investors that don't really believe in what you're doing, and so they won't follow on in your investment. And there's nothing worse to the outside world than if your initial investor doesn't follow on or isn't, or steps down. The whole world of funding is full of signals. And you have to, that's one of the things that you learn after years of doing this. There's a lot of little things that you need to manage, and choosing the right investors and choosing a valuation that allows you room to grow helps you manage those signals that will help you secure that next round.
Okay, so don't be greedy in your valuation.
I was once told, valuations don't matter, terms matter, and being here tomorrow matters. So as long as you're here tomorrow and the terms are not bad, and it's a valuation that gives you, that's not incredibly dilutive, it's a good thing.
So when you're getting your raise in your round, think about the next one and think about, okay, well, if it wants to be a higher one, then it's going to be this, and is that even realistic? And
frankly, in the end, valuation is purely a matter of how much you raise. So if you want to raise, basically almost every round will be 20 to 30% dilutive on average. So whatever you raise, that times 5 is going to be your post-money valuation.
Right. So it's not that complicated at the end of the day. Each raise, you're going to be selling 20% of your company, and so that's 5 times, boom.
Yeah. And basically, if you can't raise that 2 million, you can only raise $500,000, well, that means your valuation is £2 million, not the 20 that you wanted. That's just the way it is. Unless, again, you're transfer-wise and you're, absolutely beyond exceptional.
Right, which is what we read about all the time. Right, okay. Let's talk about company culture. It's something that we haven't really dove into too much here on the show. I don't know why, but I know it's something you're very proud of. It's something you work very hard about. So, and it's something you built from scratch, I guess. Can you tell me what those words mean to you, or what it means to you as a company culture and how you make it happen? I know, you moved back to London for part of the reason because you wanted to be face-to-face with your employees. So tell me about Skimlinks.
Yeah, it's one of those funny words, isn't it, that when you actually try to define it can be a little bit complex. But the way that we think about it is, how do we create an environment that creates the results that we want out of the company? And by results, it's not necessarily just financial results, but the softer side of things that make your day worthwhile. Ultimately, hiring and training people is a hard thing. So you want to create an environment where people want to stay, where people are happy, and where people are performing at their best. And so you create a culture that attracts the kind of people you want to work with and makes them happy. And so for us, that means creating, and our Skimlinks culture is very much one about celebrating each other, about that cheeky sense of humor, about a unique kind of sparkle to them. And actually, after a while, we recognized that we needed to define that. And so we actually have a name for it in our company, which is #SkimLove. And it came about very organically. It happened as a result of, on our Yammer board, we would like to celebrate each other's wins. And not just each other's wins internally, but we believed passionately that the best way to win as a company externally was to sell ourselves, not just our product. And so me and all our sales team and everyone that's customer facing, when we go out into the world, we project goodness and heart and sincerity. And we believe that is fundamental to the reason that we've succeeded as a company. Customers choose us and are loyal to us because they love that quality. And so whenever we would celebrate a win, we would say, hey, we won this client, #SkimLove. And so it became a kind of meme in our office.
Okay.
And then we break it down into what it means. So we break down each of the letters. So S is about the sparkle in the eyes, the fire in the eyes that you see in someone that you just recognize as a kindred spirit. K is about being kick-ass. I is about being inventive. M is about being master of your domain. L is about being likable. O is about being open-minded. V is about being vocal. And E is about being entrepreneurial. And that's our culture.
That's awesome, what you just said. I'm trying to think of what ours is going to be. And so these were characteristics that were always inside of you, I'm guessing, that you always wanted to nurture at the company, but you just kind of spelled them out recently with the hashtag.
Yes. As we got bigger, it became useful to define what was previously an unspoken and very accepted thing. But yes, in the early days, it's not something like I went on day one, decided, right, what's going to be my culture, and wrote it all out. It was a very organic thing that was driven by both me and my co-founders' personalities, I guess, and the way that we chose to lead, and the people that we chose to hire. And those are the kind of the building blocks of culture. And those early employees are so important because everything then flows on from those people. And particularly in the early days, we were ruthlessly focused on choosing people that not only had the right kind of experience, but were the right kind of people, that had the fire in the eyes, that there was a magical spark. It sounds like a very wishy-washy thing to say, but it's the same way that you recognize a friend or a partner. Like there's something that happens chemically, and so we kind of looked for that in our early team, and still now we still look for it. And it means that when you walk into Skimlinks offices, you can feel it. There is a sparkle in the air. Even our cleaner, when she walks in, she says walking into our office is the favorite part of her day, because of the energy in it. And that's because of the amazing team that we have.
What happens when someone's not sparkling enough? Do you pull them aside and you say you need to sparkle more?
Every team can, I think, we say that we can accommodate, up to 5% of people that aren't necessarily like that. And as you get bigger, it evolves, it matures. It's not all kind of, yay, aren't I amazing? Sometimes it's a quieter ferocity or, a distinguished intelligence that, I sound pathetic, but
I like that.
but it manifests in slightly different ways as you get bigger. It doesn't mean that we're all the same. It means that there's a something that draws you to them and helps us feel like a team.
So many people watching us are founders, or they want to be founders, or they're interested in this industry. And you just said that, a lot of people get caught up in fundraising when they should be thinking about the product, and then they should be thinking about their first hire. And now they're thinking, we got to find our own hashtag, Alicia. So where does that process come in? And funny enough, we're doing that right now at London Real and Silicon Real. We're trying to really write down exactly what makes us different and what we're all about. And it's fascinating. And it really is interesting just to find out, well, what are we about? And, you have an impression, and your co-founder has an impression, and your employee 1 to 3. But how important is it to sit down and hash that out before you build your product?
Oh, I think that you build your product first, but just hire great people to start with. And you only have to worry about, I think that it's, culture has to be something that flows naturally, I think. I mean, you can create things that help, initiatives that help support it. So, for instance, we, what do we do? To foster kind of, let me think.
You can't mandate the skim love.
No, but you can do things around it. Like, we believe, my co-founder and I are really strong believers that if you want, the E in skim love, which is entrepreneurial people, part of our duty then is to be very open about the process and what we've learned and what mistakes we've made. So we'll sit down with our team and tell them about the fundraising process, what worked, what didn't work, what terms we negotiated for, so that our employees, who we've all hired because they too either want to be entrepreneurs or love being part of an entrepreneurial journey, can feel that they're part of it. So that's one thing that we do to kind of enhance the culture. We also are incredibly generous when things go wrong. We support our team, and it's a very nurturing, supportive place. We've had some really awful disasters that have happened to certain team members, and when you see how the team stand together, and it's driven by the examples that we set. We're very generous financially and with our own personal time to make sure the whole team knows that we care about them and that being together means something. Okay,
tell me about laughter. You said that's an important part of the environment, and it starts from you.
Yes, absolutely. I think that I believe that if you're going to go and spend, a majority of your waking hours with a group of people,